The creative team behind Disco Elysium may have split up, but that certainly hasn't stopped it from inspiring countless others, like Esoteric Ebb, which manages to not only live up to its inspiration, but maybe even exceed it, with its unique fantasy setting that I just want to dive more into, its huge cast of memorable characters that I wish I could spend more time with, and a story with choices and consequences that I am still thinking about even well after the credits rolled. This is an instant classic that deserves more people talking about it. It's an RPG with a heavy focus on dialogue and making choices with minimal combat. This type of game lives or dies on the quality of the writing, and Esoteric Ebb hits it out of the park. It starts off as a simple mystery. A tea shop explodes, and you gotta figure out why. But it does such a great job of just slowly expanding on that initially simple premise. Even when you think about it, how does a tea shop explode? Then you learn that there's an election going on, it was a building made by dwarves so it could withstand an immense amount of force. For some reason you're not allowed to investigate it, and you have to talk to the coin master to get permission, but he won't see you. It slowly drip feeds little details like that and clues over the course of several in-game days, and the more you learn, the bigger the mystery becomes, the higher and higher the stakes get. The game also never leads you by the hand. While there are some moments where you can have a character summarize some things for you, it always gives you plenty of time to piece everything together yourself. It trusts you to come to your own conclusions and figure out this mystery on your own, which fits very well with the game's more open format. It's one of those games where very early on it just sort of lets you go, and you have the freedom to tackle your journey in any which way you want. Some things don't become available until later days, which helps keep the game from becoming too overwhelming, but there's still a multitude of ways to complete any task that's given to you. Like, you can technically get into the tea shop day one if you get lucky on a strength roll. I decided to wait to talk to Lord Darrow and ask permission, but he was a dick to my friend, and I refused to make a shitty deal with him. So instead I found my own way in using a certain spell. That's 3 ways for that one quest right there, and I know of at least 2 more. With some creativity and some luck of the dice, the game's brimming with possibilities. And I love that the game just lets me figure it out. No quest markers, no nagging NPCs, it just trusts you, making it feel truly rewarding when you do figure out a clever way into the tea shop or get that lucky roll. Small little details and characters that I thought were little more than just flavor text sometimes came back as huge revelations to the plot, or seemingly useless items became imperative to a fight much later on, like the movable rod that I got off of a windmill. Yes, that's right, a movable rod, and it probably saved my life. And the story, despite being set in a fantastical world filled with gnomes, griffins, and dead gods, is often weirdly mundane in the threats it poses. Even when I was attacked by a masked assassin, hell-bent on killing me, and Snell, my partner, initially assumed it was related to an evil cult, a storyline that would fit right at home in your average D&D or epic fantasy story, further investigation suggested something kind of chillingly normal. Someone just put a hit out on you. You're not dealing with evil dark lords or ancient evils who can only be defeated by the chosen one, but instead just political BS, like unfair taxes and legal loopholes that could lead to evictions. It makes the threats feel more real, more down to earth, like they hit closer to home, and like they actually relate to us and the real world political BS that we often have to deal with. And it's little things like stuff getting caught up in an administrative mess, or people having to jump through hoops just for basic services, or poorly thought out systems and loopholes that still technically work, just not in the way we would like. Such as how people get better rewards for hunting larger monsters, meaning most never bother dealing with smaller rodents, allowing them to run free into cities. All little things like that make the world feel real and fleshed out, like it functions outside of our character's story, like people exist with their own wants, needs, and goals from every walk of life in this world. It feels lived in. They do eventually find a way to incorporate some of those grander plots we associate with fantasy, but in a very interesting way. It does a great job of building up to it, and still feels like it relates to the struggles of the average person. And it is those moments with the average person, those smaller character-focused moments that make the story feel special. We get to see the average person and how all the administrative BS is affecting them, and how it shapes their worldview. But it's also about what we can do to fix those problems. It may take a while, but we can fix it by working together, by having sympathy and empathy for each other, and through that we can persevere and enact actual change. Even one person, one vote can make a difference when part of a collective action, and we all work toward a better future together. It ultimately shows how if we let ourselves get frustrated, if we act without thinking, without empathy for others, then it will only make things worse. We will only regress. The best we can do is help each other in building something new, not by forgetting what came before, but by learning from it. We see this play out in the game in the final confrontation when we see just what happens when you isolate yourself. We only succeed in our task with the help of our companions and all the others we interviewed before about the mystery, and we see it in side quests, like with the Asgulus newspaper and the Norvikian resistance. A lot of these quests come with this sort of theme of understanding one another, having empathy for one another, learning to work together, learning from one another, and growing from our experiences and our mistakes. And all of the many great memorable characters really sell that, like Snell. I love Snell. I want to get drinks with Snell, and I don't even drink. He'll be your main companion for most of the game. He initially looks like he'd be cocky or full of himself, but he quickly proves to be a genuinely kind-hearted, caring person with kind of a dry humor. The more I got to know him, the more I liked him, and it was fun to see him slowly open up to me. It all felt natural too. It didn't feel like dialogue options were gated off until I got friendship points, but more like a naturally growing friendship that comes just from spending time together and slowly getting to know each other through little moments of banter. Or Etir, the imposing stoic angel who I slowly broke down their walls with my goofball energy, and the way their facade cracks in subtle ways are just so endearing, and yes, you can romance them with the right dialogue choices and a little bit of luck. They're both characters from very different walks of life. Snell is a goblin, and goblins literally have to live underground and were almost completely wiped out not that long ago. They're pretty heavily discriminated against. Meanwhile, Etir works for the government. They both have reservations about each other, but slowly get to know each other and become friends, and both kind of get a different view on things by learning from each other. But even side characters like the shopkeeper or Frank, son of Frank, and even the kid that sells newspapers had some interesting things going on with them. Sitting with that kid on a roof looking out at the city as you just lend an ear to their struggles was one of the sweeter, more memorable moments of the game for me. The game does take place during election cycle, so yes, the game is political. I don't know what to tell you, it is. Your stats are literally tied to certain political beliefs and parties. I love it when games use their gameplay as part of the storytelling, and this ended up being a very interesting way of doing it, especially as all Disco Elysium legs have. Those very stats are talking to you, chiming in with their own thoughts on the events of the game. Well, they're kind of your thoughts, technically. Like, right from the get-go, as you build your character, it's interesting that the Asculus, the party for workers and unions and such, is tied to wisdom. Meanwhile, strength is very patriotic and religious, and dexterity, the stat associated with rogues and thieves in most other fantasy RPGs, is all about trade and business here. It definitely doesn't hide the fact that it wants to say something right out of the gate, and create some very fun internal conflicts with my character. I focused on wisdom and strength with a bit of charisma. So my character would often war between his faith and his desire for a more progressive society, allowing for some fun roleplay opportunities. I would usually have my character be all about wisdom and forward thinking, but in my mind, they were still religious, at least a little bit. They believed in their god, but not necessarily all the teachings of the church, so they would fall back on their belief when things got really dangerous, like a fight or something. I'm so interested to see what other internal conflicts looks like with other types of builds, and some of the topics that the game is diving into actually get pretty deep sometimes. For example, the game has this system where upon completing certain quests, your character can think on them and internalize their thoughts and experiences of that quest, and this is how you unlock feats, powerful passive abilities that you get to choose from based on what choice you make at the end. So you have like the different parts of your mind, your different stats, like warring with each other, debating each other, what you did and what choice you made, and relate that to a larger topic like immigration or gender roles, before you decide on a conclusion and get the associated ability. And they really dive into some of these subjects, and actually did give me a bit of a new perspective on some things, and had me debating with myself over the conclusion that I actually agreed with or found the most interesting, and which perk I actually wanted to use. Esoteric Ebb has this interesting time mechanic. Every time you use a new dialogue, time moves forward, and of course certain events and missions require you to be at a certain place at a certain time, like when you find a note saying that there will be a meeting of a potentially dangerous group of activists in Waterlane before midnight, or how the only time you can meet with the governor is after midnight. And the game takes place over a series of days leading up to an election, with new stuff opening up each day. Normally, I don't like time limits in games, they just kind of give me anxiety, but it worked for me here. Time doesn't advance that much per dialogue, and you're free to roam around and explore at your own leisure. And I felt both rewarded for engaging as many dialogue options as I can, especially since some dialogue options can lower the DC of some roles, but also got me thinking about everything I said and how much time it would take, and if I would be able to get to that meeting, or if I could squeeze in one more conversation. And I always could. It never felt punishing or restrictive. I even beat the game with a couple days left to spare, and only a handful of side quests left uncompleted. Never could figure out what to do with all that milk. And the world, the map, is technically very small, but dense. Even hours into the game, after I had technically been everywhere, I still felt like I was uncovering new secrets all the time. And there is no mini-map, actually there's no map at all, and that's because you really don't need one. You quickly become familiar with the area enough that it almost feels intimate. You start finding little shortcuts and hidden paths. You start to develop stories for each street and corner and navigate by that. By the end of it all, I felt like a local and could navigate the entire city with my eyes closed, like I knew every little hole in the wall. And the more I explored, the more people I talked to, and the more people I talked to, the more the rich history and lore became available to me. The city of Tolstad is brimming with history from local politics, the scars of war, and remnants of long-gone civilizations, like the race of snail people that once inhabited the city long before humans, the statues of which you can sometimes still find littering the city. I always eagerly clicked on any little highlighted word knowing it would give me some interesting detail about this world. And it all feels so fleshed out, an imperfect history of flawed people doing what they believe was right, and the equally or even more flawed people recording what they felt was best, not necessarily accurate. You can hear the stories about gods and then meet some of the people that actually walked these lands alongside them and hear what they were actually like, at least from that person's perspective. There's stories of grand adventures and small people just trying to make their way in life. It's all so fascinating, and I really hope at least one good lore channel pops up on YouTube for me to just dive into. But if not, the game has a pretty detailed breakdown of it all, assuming you were clicking all the little highlighted words, that is. And the game has this bright, beautiful, saturated art style, which makes the world feel whimsical, while still allowing for darker moments. It contrasts well with the more serious political mystery going on. Like sometimes you do deal with the problems that you're facing in a very serious way, like being the very serious cleric telling the group of teenagers to back off and give back the books they stole from their peers before they literally burned them. Other times, instead of passing an ancient test, you end up stretched out over a pit of spikes with your companion standing on your back, desperately looking for a way out of this mess. Things don't always go as planned, and sometimes you just gotta make do with the hand you're dealt, especially in combat, because there is combat in this game, albeit not much, and even then the combat still plays out through the dialogue system, making it feel more like a choose your own adventure than anything. It's basically turn-based combat. You roll initiative, you take turns hitting each other, but done more like an interactive story. It makes the fighting feel more like I'm reading an action scene in a good book, with some well-written prose describing the events in place of cinematic action, lending to the RPG feel of everything. But it allows for more context-sensitive actions that you couldn't otherwise do in a more real-time action-heavy combat system, or a more restrictive turn-based system, allowing them to make every encounter feel entirely unique. Like one encounter, I got attacked by this monster in a cave who grabbed me, and I spent much of the fight being flung around before finally breaking free. Versus when I was attacked by an assassin, and I could do a constitution roll to sort of gather my nerves and lower the DC on attack. Or how if Snell rolled a higher initiative than the assassin, he would use his turn to pull me out of the way of the assassin's first attack. These aren't like abilities that you can use all the time. It feels more like the improv you and your friends do in an actual D&D game. You take actions that aren't on a set list of abilities, but just things you can do that would make sense for your character and what the DM lets you get away with. It makes every fight have its own flow, its own solution, that isn't always just hit the enemy really hard. Even avoiding traps is done in a similar choose your own adventure style, and somehow there's just something more tense about going through the trap, my party talking their way through it and being given a few different choices to make and just watching the dice fall where they may. Esoteric Ebb is a truly special game. As the credits rolled and the game gave me a flyover shot of the city I had become as familiar with as my own, and as I looked down at all the characters I had come to love, my first thought was, man, I'm gonna miss this. It felt like the end of an era, and I can't wait to see what the next one brings.